In Bago village, there is an unwritten custom: any woman who wants to marry into the village must be inspected by the men of the village on the night before the wedding. My elder sister died on the night she married into the village. Her body was brought back in the evening, and I stumbled and wanted to rush out to see her, but my mother stopped me. My mother, with red eyes, scolded me. "What are you, a little girl, doing?" I burst into tears. That's my elder sister, the one who loves me the most. Mother was stunned for a moment by my shout. Taking advantage of this, I pushed her away, ran to the yard, and lifted the white cloth covering my sister. I saw her tragic state. She was still wearing the red wedding dress, but it was now torn into pieces, and her body was covered with bruises, looking as if she had been beaten, but the marks were excessively dense all over her body. I stood still until I saw my mother holding my sister and crying. After that day, I fell ill, possibly from shock, and slept in a daze until I was awakened in the middle of the night, drenched in cold sweat that made me shiver in the night breeze. I got up in a daze, wanting to boil some water in the kitchen to wipe my face, but when I passed by my parents' room, I saw the light still on through the crack in the door, and faint sounds coming out. I seemed to hear my sister's name and couldn't help but stop and press my ear to the crack in the door. I heard my father's tired voice coming through the crack. "Someone from Bago village came, saying that Xiaoseng is dead. The bride is gone, and they want us to return the bride price." I heard my mother shout angrily, "We haven't even settled accounts with those devils, and they have the nerve to come and ask for the bride price? I say we return the bride price and then take it to the police. Let's see what those devils..." My mother's angry words were interrupted by a loud bang. My father slapped the table and cursed, "Return the bride price? We've spent all that money on Ah Yao's wedding. How can we return it?" 2 months ago, my brother Guang Yao, who was studying at a technical college in the city, suddenly came home, bringing his pregnant girlfriend. My parents were both shocked and overjoyed and immediately talked about getting them married. But my brother's girlfriend demanded a bride price of 200,000 yuan, an astronomical figure for our family. My mother tactfully asked if it could be less, but the girlfriend cried and threatened to abort the confirmed male fetus. My father smoked a whole night, and the next day he told us he planned to marry my sister off to Bago village at the foot of the mountain. Bago village is an anomaly in the Wangyuan mountain area. The villagers seldom interact with the outside world, and girls in the village never marry out. Occasionally, they marry women from other villages, but for some reason, very few outsiders are willing to send their daughters there. However, whenever they do marry women from other villages, they offer an extremely generous bride price. For instance, when my sister married into the village, they gave a bride price of 600,000 yuan. The room was silent for a moment before I heard my mother's weak voice, "What should we do now?" Father also fell silent for a moment before saying heavily, "At this point, we can only send Xiaomei over." Xiaomei they mentioned was me. The room fell into dead silence again before I heard my mother scream, "No, no way. Xiaoseng is already dead. How can you send Xiaomei too?" Before my mother could finish her words, she was interrupted again, this time by a loud slap. I heard my father roar from inside the room, "I've decided. Don't you dare talk back to me. My daughters will marry whoever I say. You better pray that your younger daughter is more resilient than your elder daughter, or I'll send you over there instead." Early the next morning, my father knocked on my room door. His face, usually cold towards me, surprisingly had a rare hint of a smile. "Dad has thought it over. You're 18 now, and since your sister had an accident, why don't you marry into Bago village in her place?" I looked up at my father, neither agreeing nor refusing, just staring at him until his face grew uncomfortable. Then I suddenly asked, "Dad, was my sister killed by the people of Bago village?" A look of embarrassment flashed across my father's face, but he quickly scolded, "Killed or not, don't you, a little girl, talk nonsense. Anyway, the Liu family will come to pick you up in 3 days. Be ready." With that, he slammed the door and left. The news that I was to marry in Tobago village spread throughout the village the next day. My father confined me to the house, not letting me go out. But even at home, I could hear the gossip outside the house. The night before the people from Bago village came to pick me up, I was sleeping fitfully and didn't know how long I had slept when I suddenly felt a chill spreading from my lower abdomen. I woke up with a start to find someone pressing on me, tugging at my clothes. By the moonlight, I recognized Zhang Yuan, a thug from the village. He had been eyeing me since last year, but after my mother caught him and beat him with a broom, he had behaved himself. But now, he had broken into my room in the middle of the night. I fought back like a madwoman, but Zhang Yuan, who used to be somewhat cautious, now only sneered disdainfully, "Come on, Jiang Mei. Stop pretending. Everyone knows you're going to marry in Tobago village. What's wrong with letting us village folks have a taste first?" I froze at his words and asked, "What did you say?" Zhang Yuan muttered, "You don't know? The reason Bago village gives so much money every time they marry an outsider is because they're all devils. They don't treat outsiders as humans. Any girl who marries into their village has to be enjoyed by all the men in the village, absorbing the essence of every man there to become part of their village. Do you think your sister died for any other reason? That's the truth." Lying on the bed, I felt a chill run through my limbs. The people from Bago village arrived early the next morning. Leading the group were several young men who remained silent throughout, only staring when they saw me come out in my wedding dress. The wedding customs of Bago village are extremely traditional. The bride must sit in the bridal sedan chair before dawn and reach the village entrance at an auspicious hour in the evening. My brother Guangyao escorted me, grumbling impatiently all the way, all this trouble just for that 200,000 yuan bride price. Once wasn't enough, now we have to do it a second time. It's so unlucky. I pretended not to hear his complaints as I sat in the sedan chair. When we reached the entrance of our village, the sedan chair suddenly stopped. I heard my brother shout impatiently, "Why is it blocked at the village entrance early in the morning? Don't you know we're sending off a bride from the Jiang family today?" There was a moment of silence outside the sedan chair before someone exclaimed in panic, "Zhang Yuan is dead in the rice field." I heard my brother gasp and then run off to see the commotion. He came back shortly, vomiting beside the sedan chair. "Zhang Yuan is really dead. His whole body was gnawed to pieces by rats. I feel like throwing up my New Year's dinner." My brother finally stopped vomiting and suddenly thought of something, lifting the curtain of my sedan chair. "I remember this Zhang Yuan was after you before, wasn't he?" Unlike my brother's fussing, my expression remained unchanged from start to finish. I didn't answer his question and just said calmly, "Let's get going. Don't miss the auspicious hour." By 5 p.m., we finally reached the entrance of Bago village. My brother left, but the people from Bago village didn't let me enter the village. They placed me in a wooden house at the village entrance. I sat inside, listening to the men who had escorted me chatting and smoking in the courtyard. "Hey, did you see? The girl the Jian family sent this time is even younger than the last one. Isn't she? Last time I didn't get a chance before she died. It pissed me off for several nights. Come on, we're definitely in the latter half of the night in the hierarchy. Pray she isn't as useless as her short-lived sister and survives through the uncles and elders first." When those men talked about these things, they didn't try to lower their voices to avoid me. With a creak, the window behind the building suddenly opened. I saw a clumsy figure climbing in from the window carefully. "Mom!" The person who suddenly climbed in from the window was actually my mom. Before I could say anything, Mom came over and covered my mouth in panic. "Hush, Xiaomei. Keep your voice down. Don't let those people in the yard hear." Mom lowered her voice, looked outside the yard, and said nervously, "Hurry up and give me your wedding dress, and leave quickly." As she said that, Mom actually wanted to take off my clothes. I held her down and frowned. Mom, what do you want to do? Of course I want to save you. This Bago village is a wolf's den. Your sister is already dead, I can't watch you die. Hurry up and let Mom dress up in your wedding dress to hold them back first. I shook my head gently. Just like you said, this Bago village is a wolf's den. If they find out that you are pretending to be me, they will not let you go. I don't think they will give up just because. The bride has been replaced by a middle-aged woman. Mom's face turned pale, but she quickly tried to force a smile. Mom, you are already this age, and you will still have to fall in love and get married in the future. You can't let it be ruined like this. But this time I pushed her away directly. I said softly, Mom, thank you, but I must stay here today. Mom was stunned, and then she cried anxiously. You stinky girl, do you know what you are talking about? That group of them. I know. I interrupted my mother. Just because I know, I want to stay and avenge my sister. Mom looked at me blankly, and it seemed that she hadn't had time to react to the meaning of my words. Suddenly, there was a commotion outside the door. Third sister-in-law, you are here. I looked up and saw that someone seemed to be coming to the yard. I hurried to push Mom, hurry up. And Mom seemed to realize that it was too late to change clothes with me at this time. She could only reluctantly and clumsily flip out of the window again. Almost at the same time, the door of the room opened. A middle-aged woman with a pretty face but a bloated figure walked in. She immediately raised her eyebrows when she saw me, and she muttered in dissatisfaction, You are the youngest daughter of the Jiang family? How come this little body is thinner than your sister? The woman began to explain impatiently. Okay, introduce yourself. I am your future mother-in-law Zhang Guifang, and the one you are going to marry is my son Lu Feng. Let me briefly introduce the rules of our village to you. People with other surnames are not allowed to enter Bago village unless you are a daughter-in-law from another village who married in like you. But before entering the village to officially hold the wedding, you must first go through Guerun. The so-called Guerun means that you stay in this room at the entrance of the village for one night, waiting for a man of the right age in the village to moisturize you. When you have absorbed enough of the yang yuan of the men in our village, you will be considered a member of our village. Only then can you enter the village for the wedding. Zhang Guifang finished speaking in one breath, and there was a dead silence in the room. I looked up and looked directly at the room in front of me. This was a simple bedroom. According to Zhang Guifang, all brides from other villages return here. I was distracted for a moment. Zhang Guifang urged me impatiently, Did you hear me? I looked up at her, did not answer her, but asked, Do you regret it? Zhang Guifang was stunned and did not react. What did she regret? She regretted marrying to Bago village. Zhang Guifang's face froze. But soon she said impatiently, What is there to regret? It's just a return, just one night, you can get through it. I laughed when I heard this, looked up at her, and asked directly, Is it really just one night? I saw Zhang Guifang's face turn pale. She didn't say anything, but I knew the answer was no. Because I know the nature of people. Maybe my eyes were too straightforward. Zhang Guifang said anxiously, Okay, you wait here obediently. She slammed the door. The sky outside gradually darkened. I sat there and waited silently. I don't know how long it took, but the door finally opened. The first returnee finally came. I looked up and saw an old man with gray hair, who looked to be in his 50s. According to the rules of Bago village, the higher the seniority, the higher the position. When he saw me, his cloudy eyes suddenly lit up. He couldn't wait to come over and grab my hand. He looked at me and said, The youngest daughter of the Jiang family, right? She is so pretty. I didn't hide or dodge, but just looked at him and said quietly, Have you seen my sister? The village chief froze and said with a smile, "Of course. I am the one who brings back all the brides from other families in Bago village." As he said this, he smacked his lips regretfully and said, "Speaking of your sister, what a beautiful girl. I was thinking that after she marries into the village, I can come from time to time." Village Chief Lu was halfway through his words when he suddenly realized that he had spoken out of turn and quickly shut up and smiled. As he finished speaking and his aged body moved to touch me, he suddenly froze. His eyes widened in disbelief, his face turned ashen, and he slowly fell to the ground. He fell heavily, revealing a green snake coiled around his foot. At the same time, I squatted down. The village chief still had a breath left, staring at me in disbelief, his body trembling uncontrollably. I looked him in the eye and calmly asked, "How did my sister die?" The village chief's tongue had become paralyzed from the snake venom, and he struggled to utter unclear words, "I don't know." I slowly closed my eyes, and the snake bit his ankle again. The village chief shuddered and then stopped moving entirely. Meanwhile, the snake slithered up to my finger. Facing the snake, I did not flinch but gently held it, and it affectionately rubbed against my finger. I had kept my ability to communicate with animals a secret for a long time. Since I could remember, I could hear and talk to all the animals around me. I once thought this was a common ability, just like humans talking to each other. Until one day when I was 5 years old, the neighbor's kid bullied me, and I asked a snake to bite him. The kid's grandmother saw it and screamed that the Jiang family's second daughter was a witch. Only then did I realize that this ability was unique. So, I learned to hide myself. I no longer talked to animals in front of others, nor did I reveal my ability to command them. But only I knew that this ability grew stronger as I aged. Any animal, from insects to wild beasts, aquatic or terrestrial, whether ferocious or docile, would obey my command. I began to secretly use my ability to solve my problems. For instance, the night before my wedding, when Zhang Yuan tried to assault me, I had rats kill him. I regretted not knowing what my sister faced when she was to marry in Tobago village. I was naive and thought she was just getting married, so I didn't use my ability to protect her. Now, I could only use my ability to avenge her. After the village chief, several more old men came. I used the same trick, having the snake bite and paralyze them before asking about my sister's death. They had all participated in Gue Run with her, but none knew how she died. After each man was bitten to death, I threw the body out of the window and rang the bell at the door. This was their Gue Run rule. When one person finished, they would ring the bell at the door, which was connected to another bell in the village. As I rang the bell here, the bell in the village would also ring, summoning the next man. Gue Run lasts only one night and ends at dawn, so the men from Bago village came in a hurry. They didn't notice that the previous Gue Run participants had disappeared. Soon, the sixth participant arrived, finally not an old man but a fat man around 40 years old. As soon as he entered, he was breathing heavily, and a snake silently coiled around his ankle, which he didn't notice. He eagerly took out a pill to force into my mouth. The fat man suddenly froze as the snake bit him, and he fell stiffly, the pill rolling out of his hand. I grabbed his collar, a murderous gleam in my eyes. "What pill did you give me? Did my sister die from this pill?" The fat man's limbs were already stiff, his tongue beginning to numb, his plump face full of terror, his eyes constantly moving. He struggled to speak, and no. "I did give it to your sister, but I was helping her." A strong hatred flashed in my eyes, and I stomped on the fat man, turning to the ants on the ground and coldly said, "This piece of meat is yours today." I threw him into the wardrobe in the room. In the dim light, countless black lines gathered on the ground, and broken, stiff sounds came from his throat. I didn't know how long it took, but the fat man's voice finally stopped. I then walked to the door and rang the bell. I heard laughter and banter in the courtyard. This time, it wasn't just one person coming, but two young men, their loud voices carrying through the night. Oh, that fat guy, always taking the longest time, just like before. You know, the uncles go first, and they're old, so they're quick. Besides, you know how the fat guy is. Just as their voices approached the door, the snake was ready to strike. Suddenly, another voice came from the courtyard, "Big brother, second brother." This voice sounded somewhat clean. The two men stopped, sounding surprised. "Xiao Wu, why are you here?" The one called Xiao Wu hesitated before answering. I thought it over and decided to join Gue Run. "So, today, can I go first?" There was a moment of silence outside before I heard the two men burst into laughter. "Xiao Wu, you've finally figured it out. You didn't want to before, but now you've come around. All right. Since you want to, as your big brother, I'll give you this chance. Second brother, let Xiao Wu go first." With that, the big brother and second brother laughed and left, discussing lewdly how long Xiao Wu would take. Shortly after, the door creaked open, and a clean-looking young man walked in. The snake was ready to strike, but I raised my hand to stop it. The young man didn't notice the snake in the dark and quickly came to me, saying, "While no one's around, you should leave quickly." I looked up at the young man, frowning slightly. "Why are you letting me go?" The young man stammered, "I just can't stand it. They're too much." When he mentioned my sister, I looked up sharply. The young man couldn't meet my eyes, filled with guilt. Honestly, I wanted to stop them before, but I never had the courage. Until I saw your sister's body, I realized I couldn't stand by and let innocent girls get hurt anymore. He suddenly looked at me, "So, I must let you go." I looked at the young man but didn't move. After a moment, I asked, "Do you know how my sister died?" Xiao Wu trembled slightly, avoiding my question. "All right, big brother and second brother will be back soon. We should go." He tried to pull me, but then he noticed something, looking at me in surprise. "Why are your clothes still intact?" The previous men had all been eager to start, so they hadn't noticed my clothes were still intact. I didn't answer his question, just pushed his hand away and said calmly, "Thank you, but I won't leave." The young man looked at me in astonishment. Just then, the voices of his big brother and second brother came from outside. "Xiao Wu, how's it going in there? Everything all right?" Xiao Wu turned pale upon hearing them return, and I completely freed myself from his grasp, saying calmly, "See? I can't leave now. You should go alone." The young man looked at me, then sighed and left. As he walked out, his big brother and second brother were surprised. "You're done already?" Xiao Wu mumbled something and quickly left. His big brother and second brother entered, their eyes going wide when they saw me. One of them had a bag and opened it, revealing all sorts of terrifying tools, some still stained with blood. I thought of the wounds on my sister's body, my hand clenching into a fist unconsciously. The men didn't notice the murderous intent in my eyes. One of them even reminded the other, "Take it easy. Last time, her sister died because of you. This girl's body is even weaker." My murderous intent erupted, and I shouted, "Green snake, bite." The two men were startled, their eyes widening in an instant before they fell to the ground, rigid and motionless. I looked down at them coldly and said, "How should I avenge my sister?" Their eyes widened even more, finally understanding something. Feeling their tongues growing stiff, they struggled to speak. "Your sister didn't die just because of us." I ignored them, softly calling out to the animals through the window. The men didn't know what I was doing but felt a sense of foreboding, quickly trying to explain, "We did hurt your sister, but if she had rested, she wouldn't have had any big problems. It was the others who didn't want to miss the Gue Run opportunity that caused her death." The two men frantically defended themselves, but I acted as if I couldn't hear them, continuing to murmur to the air. In a moment, countless creepy sounds came from outside the window. The two men saw the approaching creatures, their eyes widening, trying to scream, but they were paralyzed, unable to make a sound. Under the torment of various poisonous creatures, they emitted painful noises from their broken throats. I didn't know how long it took, but they finally fell silent. The pain my sister endured, I would make them repay 100-fold, 1,000-fold. Once they were quiet, I was about to ring the bell when suddenly, a shout came from outside the window, "The bodies! The bodies of the missing people are here!" Outside the window, countless flashlight beams flickered. I immediately realized that someone had found the bodies I had thrown out. There was a lot of commotion outside the courtyard, followed by angry shouts. I slowly straightened my wedding dress and pushed open the door. Almost all the other men from Bago village were outside, holding flashlights in one hand and kitchen knives or axes in the other, surrounding the courtyard fiercely. When they saw me come out, they shouted, "Where are the big brother and second brother? And the fat guy?" It was clear they had noticed the discrepancy between the bodies and the missing people. I said calmly, "Their sins were greater. I made them atone." The men roared and charged at me with their knives and axes. But I raised my head and blew a sharp whistle towards the nearby forest. Our village and Bago village are both situated around Wanyuan Mountain, a large nature reserve with vast undeveloped forested areas, teeming with wild animals. As my whistle pierced the night, a cacophony of sounds suddenly came from the forest. The men from Bago village stopped in their tracks, panicking. "What is that noise?" The sound grew louder and louder until the ground began to tremble. Even the men from Bago village, who had grown up at the foot of the mountain, were frightened at this moment. What emerged from the forest? Leopards, black bears, wolves, vultures, countless wild animals, all running in packs as if the entire ferocious wildlife of Wanyuan Mountain had descended upon them. The animals seemed oblivious to each other, their eyes only on the people of Bago village. The villagers went mad with fear, screaming and running in all directions. But the wild animals chased them like crazy, hunting them down. Some of the men in Bago village were hunters, but even the most skilled could only handle one or two wild animals, not such a vast number. Screams filled the air. Amid the chaos, I slowly closed my eyes. "Sister, I have avenged you. Can you rest in peace now?" By the next morning, nearly all the men in the village were dead, except for a few children and some elderly who couldn't move. Only Xiao Wu survived. The police were naturally alerted by the sheer number of deaths. After investigating, they concluded that the wild animals had rampaged out of the forest and killed so many people. No one could explain why so many wild animals had suddenly gone on a rampage. Almost all the women who had married in Bago village left on their own, and in the chaos, no one noticed me, the newlywed bride from another village, who had disappeared. The next day, I returned home. My mother, her eyes red from crying, was stunned to see me in my wedding dress. She suddenly came to her senses, rushing to hug me in surprise. "You're back. Are you all right?" I held her hand and smiled. "Mom, I'm fine." After confirming that my clothes were not torn, my mother breathed a sigh of relief, but then she burst into tears. "Xiaomei, do you know that a lot of things happened to our family after you left? Your father fell off a cliff and died, and your brother was bitten by a leopard and his legs were broken. He will never be able to get up again. Your brother's girlfriend ran away when she saw what happened. It was really a sin." My mother was crying so hard that she was out of breath, but I was not surprised at all. I smiled and asked, "Isn't this good?" My mother's crying stopped abruptly. I said to her gently, "Mom, those who hurt and used us can no longer hurt us. Isn't that good?" My voice seemed to have the power to bewitch people. I saw that my mother's tears had also stopped. I smiled and held my mother's hand. We went to my sister's tombstone together and gently put down a flower. Finally, my sister can rest in peace.